the road again. We can't wait to get on the road again. Telling stories to our family and our friends. We can't wait to get on the road again. On the road again. We can't wait to get on the road again. Telling stories to our friends. We can't wait to get on the road again.
Welcome to our monthly AAA podcast, Affinity, Allie, and Annette on the road to good storytelling with your hosts, Allie Spooner and Annette Morey.
Each month, we'll invite a special guest to join us as we discuss various topics of interest to writers and readers. We'll invite our guests to do a short reading and then follow with questions on the featured topic while encouraging them to do at least one giveaway to our audience.
This month, so excited, we're going to be talking about shapeshifters. Those sexy women who turn into wolves or spiritual animals, or I've even read some shapeshifter books about dragons, which are pretty cool, actually. As a bonus, we'll also discuss First Nations lore. Your co-host, Allie Spooner, is our featured author today, and she discusses her latest novella, Two-Spirit Warrior. All right, I can't wait to hear the reading that Allie's going to do from Two-Spirit Warrior. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All righty.
Just to give you an idea of where we are in the story, Santa, who is an ex-Army scout, also a Native American woman, and Takina, who is also Native American, is kind of a wandering lone wolf, so to speak. She's not felt comfortable in her tribe for years and has just kind of wandered looking for a new place, a new home to call. They have got their homestead set up in Utah, and they are getting ready for the first winter that they will share together. And they have some ideas to go out and trap and hunt. So this is what we're going to pick up in the story. Santa was awake early to gather the trapping supplies. She was surprised at how much the temperature had dropped from the previous day. The gray clouds hung low, and Santa felt they would soon get snow again. When Takina joined her, they carried the traps and hatchet to her first sight. I'm good from here if you want to look for a moose. I will make some sets here and a few more up the river. I'll find you if you're not back. Santa nodded. If you hear a shot, will you return for my horse? We can use them to bring the moose home. Good luck, Takina said, as Santa walked away from the river. As Santa walked deeper into the forest, the darker it became. The needles and limbs of the trees blocked out any attempt the sun made to shine through, and the temperature was much colder. Even close to the river wasn't this cold. She kept moving to keep warm and looked for signs of life. When her path crossed a game trail, Santa decided to follow it for a time. She pulled out the mittens Takina had tucked into her pocket and slipped them over her hands. Takina placed her sets in areas where she had harvested beavers in recent months. There were plenty of signs that they were still active in the area. She concentrated on her task and was surprised to see the snow had begun to fall. Hopefully, if Santa did not find a moose soon, she would return to the river before the snow started falling harder. Takina was setting her last trap when she heard the rifle shot. That's my little wolf. She gathered her tools and started toward home. Santa had followed the trail for some time and decided to rest on a fallen tree. She felt the forest was eerily quiet for so early in the day, but the animals may have sensed the change in weather and burrowed in for the cold. Santa hadn't seen any rabbit or ground squirrel, which generally would have been foraging. The complete silence gave her an advantage when she heard steps heading in her direction. She removed the mittens from her right hand and checked the load on her rifle as she waited. Moments later, she spotted movement in the dense brush as the bull moose with large antlers pushed toward the river. Santa waited until he stepped out into the open of a small meadow and stopped to paw at the earth, looking for food. She raised her rifle and drew aim at the animal, and when he lifted his head, she slowly squeezed the trigger. The sound of the shot was amplified in the cold and rang through the forest. Santa approached him cautiously when he dropped to the ground, waiting to ensure he was dead before she got too close. She slid a fresh cartridge into the rifle to replace the one she had spent. An injured animal of that size could cause severe injury to any predator. Certain Takina had heard the shot. Santa moved forward and eviscerated the animal. Removing the guts will make the animal easier and lighter to transport. The blood from the severed neck filled the air with a coppery scent as Santa worked. She began trimming the skin from the flesh while she waited for Takina to arrive. Santa heard a large animal approach and looked up, thinking Takina had made good time with the horse. The blood in her veins ran cold as her eyes landed on the grizzly 50 yards away. The smell of blood and the sound of the shot had drawn him to the kill. He stood on his hind legs to intimidate Santa as he swayed back and forth, releasing a rumbling growl. His height was immense, much taller than any man. Santa knew the smart thing would be to sacrifice her kill to the much larger predator, but she was damn tired of having items stolen from her. She stood and held her ground, her rifle in her bloody hands, fully loaded. "This is mine," Santa yelled at the bear. "You will not take it." The bear took several steps toward her and dropped to all fours. They stared at one another for several long minutes as each weighed the odds of an encounter. "Just go away," she yelled loudly. Rage coursed through her body. Santa caught a flash of movement off to her left, and she glanced quickly to see the wolf. She was snarling, trying to draw the bear's attention without success. The bear lifted his muzzle in the air, smelling the blood, and licked his lips. Santa knew he could see her as a potential threat, but his lust for fresh meat was winning the battle over his caution. When he decided the feast was worth the risk, he began to charge toward Santa. "Damn!" Santa yelled and began firing at the beast. She hit him solidly 4 times before he stumbled and fell to the ground. Santa's knees were weak and threatened to buckle as cold sweat broke out across her skin. She had never encountered such an animal and prayed it would be long before she did again. Santa dropped to her knee to steady her nerves and breathing. Her heart still raced, full of adrenaline. Takina had reached the barn and slipped the bridle over Santa's horse when she heard repeated gunshots. Her heart sank. Santa never needed more than one shot to take any animal down. "Santa, are you good?" Santa was out of reach of Takina's mental projection, which caused her greater anxiety. Without another thought, Takina leapt onto the horse's back and raced toward the sound of the shots. Branches whipped across her arms and face as she crashed through the forest to reach Santa. She reached out with her mind again, but failed to get an answer. "Please, please, please be all right, little wolf." Takina was desperate and sent out another message to Santa. "Are you safe, little wolf?" Tears were falling down Takina's cheeks, and her heart pounded when she finally heard Santa's voice in her head. "I'm safe. Stupid, but safe. That's all that matters. I should reach you soon. Will you let off another round so I can focus on your location?" Takina heard a shot several hundred yards ahead of her. "Getting close. I can hear the horse. Follow the game trail and you will find me." Takina slowed, searching for the trail, and then sent the horse trotting forward. Takina could see Santa in the distance, kneeling beside a large, dark mass. The horse slid to a stop and refused to travel any closer, despite Takina's urging. Takina slipped from his back and ignored the pain in her leg as she raced to Santa. Her heart caught on her chest when she recognized the large mass as a grizzly bear. Santa steadied her breathing and cautiously approached the bear. There was no sign of breath or movement, but she poked the bear hard with the tip of the rifle. Satisfied he was dead, Santa sank to her knees. She could hear a horse rushing towards her, and when she heard Takina's voice in her head, she replied as calmly as she could. She lifted her rifle and let off another shot to reveal a location to Takina. Santa was still on her knees, staring at the bear when Takina arrived. Takina knelt beside her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm so glad you're alive." "Me too," Santa admitted. "What happened?" "I was prepping the moose for travel. I thought you were arriving when I heard a noise, and I looked up to find the bear was 50 yards away." The bear tried to scare me away from the kill. That would have been a wise move, Takina said. I know that, but my rage overwhelmed me. I am so damn tired of things being taken away from me. Takina looked away from Santa's face at the bear. He's huge. When he stood up, he was taller than any man I've seen. Santa turned and pointed to the wolf. She tried to protect me by drawing the bear's attention, but the smell of the blood was driving him crazy. Thank you, grandmother, Takina said. He's huge, he repeated. We need to think of a way to get him home. He's too big to try to carry out, and there's no way we can lift him onto a horse. The wagon is out too. Even if I could get it back here, your horse would not approach once he got the bear scent. Smarter than his rider, Santa joked. I will ride back and bring the wagon as close as possible. I'll get meat sacks and we'll butcher the animals here and take them out in sections. Are you up to that? Santa asked when she saw blood staining Takina's leg. It opened up when I ran to you after the horse balked. Go sit and let me wrap it, Santa said. Santa inspected the wound and carefully wrapped Takina's leg. I'll relax until you get back and then we can butcher these beasts together. Santa nodded and left the rifle with Takina despite her protest. I'll be back as quickly as I can. Santa raced to her horse and rode back to the cabin. She whistled for the horses, grabbed meat sacks, hitched two of the horses to the wagon, and started back to the clearing. It would make the work easier if she could get close to where the horse balked. She drove the wagon to the spot, and when she set the brakes, she rushed back to Takina. Takina hadn't rested, as she said. She'd already skinned the moose and had 2 quarters cut. Santa shook her head, and Takina opened a bag as Santa placed the meat in the sack. You finish here, and I'll start on the bear. It was hours before they finished harvesting the meat and had carried it to the wagon with the moose pelt. Now is the time for some trickery, Santa said. She took 2 remaining meat bags and covered the horse's eyes with a thick cloth. When I start back with the bear skin, slip the feed bags over their heads and talk to them to distract them while I keep them while I can get the skin loaded onto the wagon. Clever. I would have never thought of that, Takina said. Santa grinned and walked back to the bear skin. She placed the severed head in it and rolled it as best she could to hide the head. Grunting, she lifted the heavy load and rushed to the wagon. Thankfully, her clever trick had worked, and she placed the skin into the wagon without incident. Damn, I'm glad that part's over, Santa said as she climbed onto the wagon bench. Let's go home. Still lots of work ahead of us. Takina turned to the wagon, and they started home. Do you want me to check the nets for some fresh fish for supper when the meat is hung in the smoker? Santa shook her head. Tonight we eat the bear. The heart and liver will provide us meat from your frying pan for several meals, Santa smiled. I'll hang the meat if you start slicing and cooking. I'll get these 2 hides salted and tacked into the cabin's front wall to begin drying. If we can boil that wild smell from the bear hide, it will make a heavy blanket for our bed. It was hard for me to lift it into the wagon. He was one of the biggest bears I've ever seen. It must have been terrifying to encounter him. I won't lie, my blood ran cold when we locked eyes, but then the rage and adrenaline took over and I was stupidly fearless. I would call it instead brave. You protected what was yours at all costs. Promise me if there's a next time you'll at least consider walking away? Takina smiled when Santa nodded. She knew if Santa was placed in this position again, she would react the same way as today. If daylight is left after we eat, I can take a walk to check the nets. I will go instead. You have opened that wound and need to begin healing again. I believe if I shifted now, my wolf would heal the remainder of the wound, Takina said. Do that now, then. We can always eat later. Call out if you need me and I'll come running. Santa unhitched the horses from the wagon and sent them off to grave. As Takina walked toward the river, her form shifted into that of her wolf form. She trotted south with a slight limp. I hope that works. Be safe, she projected to Takina. Always, little wolf. Santa could hear the soft laughter in her mind. She dropped the gate on the wagon, began hanging the meat in the smokehouse, added more wood to both smokehouses, and walked to the cabin for salt. She spread both hides across the ground and was amazed the bear was twice the size of the large moose. Santa rubbed liberal amounts of salt into each pelt and then tacked them to the cabin's front wall. It took up most of the space around the door, but would have some protection from the elements. The bear's head and paws sat on the gate of the wagon. Santa lifted a foot and shivered when she saw the size of the claws. One slash from those would have ripped her nearly in half. The sharp teeth in the bear's mouth were no less terrifying. Santa realized how fortunate she was to have had her rifle with her. She would be dead if she were armed with a musket or a pistol. Santa decided she would remove the claws, but she would mount the bear's head onto a board and hang it above the cabin's front wall. A potential intruder might see the bear's head and be warned away. It just wasn't anyone who could face down and kill a bear, especially one of this size. She would deal with the claws and head later. Santa was tired and needed a cool drink of water. She walked to the river and washed her hands and arms before using a dipper to sip the cool water. Santa sat back on the boulder to rest and stared across the river. Maybe they would cross the bridge next spring to explore the other side. The thought of the bridge reminded her that she needed to check for fish. She walked to the barn, picked up a meat bag, and started to the bridge. When Santa arrived, she found Takina already harvesting fish. Several large trout lay on the bridge, and Santa could see several more in the net. She chuckled and began loading the fish into the bag. How was your run? It was perfect, and the healing worked. I feel strong again and have no limp. That's good news. Let's get these fish processed inside the smoker and call it a night. Takina heard the weariness in Santa's voice. It had been a physically and emotionally draining day for her. I will take care of the fish if you start supper. Santa nodded. Please leave one in the shelter for the wolf. She did her best to protect me today. I will, Takina said as she shouldered the bag and they returned to the cabin. Santa called the horses to the barn for the night and took the bucket of bear organs to the table to begin slicing them while the frying pan heated on the stove. The liver was cooking nicely as Santa finished cutting the heart. She picked up a large portion when Takina arrived. I'm going to leave this for the wolf and thanks, and then clean up at the river. Will you keep an eye on the meat? Yes, I will. I've gotten our water for the night, so take your time and relax. Santa nodded and walked out the door. She placed the chunk of bear meat in the shelter and walked to the river to wash her hands. The snow had begun to fall again, large, wet flakes that clung to everything in sight. So beautiful, Santa thought as she watched it swirl to the ground. The full moon was rising and glowed across the gathering of snow on the earth. She felt it pulling her. Not tonight, but soon, she spoke. She would run wild and free very soon. Santa ate her fill of meat and fry bread until her weariness overtook her. I need to lie down, she told Takina. Go and rest. I will pick up here and join you. Santa stretched out on the bed and within minutes fell asleep. The last thing she remembered was Takina whispering, I love you, but she was too far into relaxation to respond.